Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
I've always considered myself to be a caring head teacher who acts sensitively to support staff mental health. But what I found increasingly difficult was managing the negative impact on staff mental health when resolving issues related to their employment or daily work. Heartfelt Leadership has been developed by Teachwell Toolkit as a handbook to support head teachers to overcome the challenges of school improvement while supporting staff well-being. We know that difficult conversations can quickly turn into conflict if procedures are not fully transparent, understood and followed. Our handbook takes you through step-by-step processes while maintaining mutual respect, avoiding conflict and finding solutions.
At Bloomsbury Education, we're passionate about supporting teachers with high-quality professional development books from leading experts. Whether you're navigating your first crucial years as an early career teacher or a more experienced teacher looking to refresh your practice or take a step up into leadership, our award-winning books are here to help. We publish practical books to support teaching across primary and secondary, from the very best in research-led practice to trusted advice on inclusivity, behaviour and curriculum design. Visit the Bloomsbury Education website at bloomsbury.com/education to find out more and use code BLOOMTTR24 to save 20% on all education titles. Bloomsbury Education, books for every step of your teaching journey.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Hello and welcome to The Late Show with me, your host Nadia. Today we'll be delving into the world of music education, finding out what it's really like to be a music teacher, and my guest Daniel Connor will help us delve into how leadership can support the music department.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello and welcome. Can I just start by saying, how amazing does it feel to not have to put on your alarm for tomorrow? Definitely wishing everybody some rest and relaxation. I hope that you will be doing that tomorrow. So welcome, and I'm so excited to, start the conversation about music education. And I wanted to begin by just expressing that I've always been and always will be a strong advocate for music education for all. So emphasis on the for all. From the very start of my career, I've held a firm belief that every student deserves access to music and, more importantly, deserves access to high quality music education. And I've never been one to subscribe to the elitist view of music being only for the most talented or the most privileged students. So with that being said, hello, I'm Nadia, your host. Who am I exactly? I currently am a head of performing arts. Prior to this, I was head of music and teacher of music. So I really am excited to talk to you about my journey, and I encourage you, if you are listening live, to text in to the show and share your views as well. I'm open to hearing what is currently working well in your school and your department. I'm also open to learning about what would be happening within your school. And if you're not a music teacher and you're listening to this, please share what your school are currently doing within their music department and kind of the arts, as it were. Coming up in today's show, I'm going to be talking to my guest, Daniel Connor, who is a former head teacher, who I worked really closely with for about 3 years. And we're going to be talking to you about how to reintegrate music onto the curriculum. So if you are sitting and you are in a school currently that doesn't have music, think about why that may be, and let's try and have the conversation, open up the discussion to get us back to integrating music. And how can senior leaders really support the music provision within a school? So that will be coming up shortly, and we're just going to take a break for the news.
I've always considered myself to be a caring head teacher who acts sensitively to support staff mental health. But what I found increasingly difficult was managing the negative impact on staff mental health when resolving issues related to their employment or daily work. Heartfelt Leadership has been developed by Teachwell Toolkit as a handbook to support head teachers to overcome the challenges of school improvement while supporting staff well-being. We know that difficult conversations can quickly turn into conflict if procedures are not fully transparent, understood and followed. Our handbook takes you through step-by-step processes while maintaining mutual respect, avoiding conflict and finding solutions.
At Bloomsbury Education, we're passionate about supporting teachers with high-quality professional development books from leading experts. Whether you're navigating your first crucial years as an early career teacher or a more experienced teacher looking to refresh your practice or take a step up into leadership, our award-winning books are here to help. We publish practical books to support teaching across primary and secondary, from the very best in research-led practice to trusted advice on inclusivity, behaviour and curriculum design. Visit the Bloomsbury Education website at bloomsbury.com/education to find out more and use code BLOOMTTR24 to save 20% on all education titles. Bloomsbury Education, books for every step of your teaching journey.
This is Teachers Talk Radio News with John Gibbs. The first story this week is once again Ofsted. Following last week's news that, contrary to advice from the cross-party committee in the House of Commons, the government would persist with single-word assessments of schools. This week, Ofsted Chief Sir Martin Oliver announced that he would like Ofsted inspections to feel more like a peer review. At the Schools and Academies show on the 2nd of May, Sir Martin indicated that Ofsted had embarked on a reform journey, and he further noted that he wanted Ofsted inspections to feel like, in some ways, a peer review system. While Ofsted and Sir Martin have launched the Big Listen consultation, a group of former Ofsted inspectors, academics, experienced teachers and head teachers, led by Professor Colin Richards and Frank Norris MBE, have launched the alternative Big Listen. They've set up their own website and are accepting responses and views from across the education world. The 50% rule in English faith school admissions, introduced in 2010, stipulating that where newly established academies with a religious character are oversubscribed, at least 50% of their places would be open places, i.e. allocated without reference to faith, is to be scrapped in plans announced by the government. The government also plans to allow churches and religious groups to open faith-based schools for children with special educational needs, which campaigners warned could raise ethical issues. Proposals to scrap the 50% cap, which only applies when schools have more applicants than places, are opposed by Rowan Williams, the former Archbishop of Canterbury, on the grounds that it would be divisive and likely to penalise disadvantaged children by denying them access to local schools. While the government believes that faith-based schools give parents greater choice, encourage better behaviour, and also academic outcomes, Andrew Copston, the Chief Executive of Humanist UK, is quoted as saying, "The proposal to allow 100% religious discrimination in new state faith schools will increase religious and racial segregation." Teaching assistants are again in the news this week. While recent stories of their declining numbers, their stagnating pay, have been regular features of the news, this week a survey reported in Secondary Education News involving 6,000 teaching assistants in England and Wales found that 39% are covering classes for at least 5 hours a week. A further 15% say they are leading full classes for at least 11 hours a week. National guidance states that support staff should not actively teach any classes they cover, but 75% of the teaching assistants said they have ended up teaching rather than supervising. Astria Academy Trust, which controls 26 schools in the Yorkshire and Cambridgeshire area, is seeking to hire a new executive head teacher on a salary between £116,000 and £133,000 a year. These salaries might seem generous in the light that the St Ivo Academy, a secondary school in St Ives and run by the Trust, is making cuts for classroom resources, but it should also be placed in the light that the new executive principal position comes with 3 layers of management above it. Above the new executive principal would be Secondary Regional Director for Cambridgeshire, Jo Mayhill Johnson. Above her, in the Trust's hierarchy, sits Richard Tutt, its Director for Secondary Education, and above him, Rowena Hackwood, Astria's Chief Executive. And the number of Astria's employees paid at least £100,000 a year has increased from 7 to 10 from 2022 to 2023. It is reported that Ofqual have warned that exam results, GCSE and A-level, will be down this year. This will be the result of the return to pre-pandemic conditions, meaning candidates had no prior warning of what might be coming up in the exams, and the lost learning that resulted from the COVID pandemic. In an interview in Education Week, the statistician Dennis Sherwood once again stated his view that A-level and GCSE grades are only reliable to one grade either way. If you wish to listen to interviews with Dennis Sherwood, you can find them in the Teachers Talk Radio back catalogue, or follow many of these news items on the weekly review on Sunday mornings. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with John Gibbs. Thank you for listening.
I've always considered myself to be a caring head teacher who acts sensitively to support staff mental health.
Hello and welcome back. I don't know how any of you other music teachers feel, but for me, I will always care about and champion inclusivity and accessibility to music and the arts. So within my classroom, I always strive to create an environment where every student feels valued, feels supported and empowered through music. On reflection to my creating the show or thinking about the topic, I was reflecting on how I experienced music in school, and I've always loved music. I've always been one that wanted to be in that music classroom, and I guess that the teachers always gravitated towards the students that were more musical and kind of more interested in the subject. And it always made me feel like I was important. But then reflecting on that as me being a teacher now, how would all of the other students have felt? Were they actually given those opportunities to thrive, even if they weren't, quote unquote, naturally kind of gifted or musical? So for me, inclusivity and just allowing a space for each and every student that comes into my classroom to feel like they've got the same chance and potential to grow. I don't know how you feel about when you choose a new school to be a part of, or when you choose to move on in your career. One of the determining factors for me is always the head teacher. And what I mean by that is I always need to feel that there is a sense of care and kind of love for the arts and for music. And so I'm going to touch on different parts of my career and different jobs that I've worked, and really, really looking at how much music was supported within that scenario. One of them being in a school where I worked, where my actual guest is going to be. So my guest for the show is Daniel Connor, who has been in education for almost 40 years, coming up to 40 years now. He has worked all over the world in countries including West Africa, Malaysia, North London, Bedfordshire, and most recently Luton. He has extensive experience being a senior leader, and I know I very much appreciated working under Daniel when we worked together at Chorley High School for Boys. Before I get my guest on, I just want to kind of give some context. So we worked in the school where music hadn't been on the curriculum for a considerable amount of time. And I distinctively remember my interview, I guess, or informal interview and visit to the school. At this point in my career, I was faced with two opportunities at the time, and one of which was working at this school, which had never had music before, and another opportunity was working within an established department that kind of was very, very successful and had music, or had a long-standing reputation for music being successful. If you are listening live, I encourage you to text in. I'd very much appreciate and would love to hear what's working well in your school, and anything that you're finding challenging. We'd love to use this space to talk not just about my career and kind of the things that I've learned along the way, but also sharing that, or sharing what you're currently doing within your music department. So going back to me being faced with these two opportunities, this opportunity at the school really excited me. And I remember going home thinking, I really want to be somewhere where I can potentially make a difference. Music education is definitely about making a difference for me. And I was excited at this prospect. So I'm going to welcome my first guest on. This is former head teacher Daniel Connor. Good evening, Daniel. How are you?
Good evening, Nadia. I'm very, very well, thank you. Just had my supper. Like you, enjoying the prospect of not having to go to work tomorrow morning. And yeah, it's lovely to be here. And good evening to everybody who's listening tonight as well. Talk about this very important subject. Lovely introduction. Thank you very much for that.
Oh, you're very, very welcome. Did I miss anything out on your introducing you? Did I get that everything correct?
No,
Is there
you got
anything?
it spot on. You did miss a spell in Scotland, but we won't worry about the detail.
No problem. So I just wanted to start off by saying, can you tell us all a little bit about what you're up to at the moment? What are you doing? What are you involved in? I'm sure we'd all like to know.
Sure, yeah. Well, I sort of semi-retired about 18 months ago from the headship of the school where we worked together. And since then, I've been working a nominal 2 days a week with the Multi-Academy Trust, the same one that I was working in when I was the head teacher. And I now do sort of support work around different schools. Very interesting work in Milton Keynes and in local Luton schools as well. And yeah, I'm just enjoying that tremendously. Really, really exciting to see different schools and to see the different ways they approach things. And also, I have to say, it's slightly less pressured, slightly less harassing at times than being a head teacher. Much though I love that job, it's the best job in the world. I would encourage everybody to aim for that. But I say it is nice to have a slightly slower pace of life these days.
Okay, that sounds really, really great. Just touching on that, because you've mentioned being a head teacher was probably one of the best jobs in the world. What would you say is your highlight? What was the highlight of your kind of career in being a head teacher?
Oh, that's a tough question. I think certainly my last headship, which was at the school that we worked at together, was probably the one I enjoyed the most, and I think that was probably because I was more experienced at that stage, and was probably slightly better at the job than I had been when I first became a head teacher. But yeah, I mean, I think highlights are just working with a school and seeing it flourish, seeing it go from strength to strength, and again working with you and getting music really firmly established on the curriculum in a sustainable way, because we've both moved on, and yet music is still flourishing and thriving at the school. So yeah, I think that's a highlight. So no one thing, but just the sheer joy in working in a context where things are getting better all the time, and you feel as though people are pulling together for the benefit of the children and the young people. Yeah, great fun.
Absolutely. So, just for context, I'm just gonna give everybody some context and kind of go through um, how we reintegrated music. And if there are any leaders listening, let's give them some practical steps to take to ensure that music is successful and thriving, and not just surviving on the curriculum. Um, as you can imagine, or as you already know, I absolutely love music. It's something that I'm incredibly, incredibly passionate about. And prior to getting you onto the show, one of the things that were really important to me is knowing that the head teacher has the same sort of vision and passion for integrating and having music on the curriculum. So, before we start, I guess the school where we worked, for context, I guess was an all boys school. And I think within that, there are challenges kind of teaching in an all boys school and then having music in an all boys school. That's number one. And do you just want to briefly give some context, as in like the makeup of the school? It was obviously in Luton. And another question would be, what challenges did you face when there was no music on the curriculum?
Yeah, sure. Thanks very much. So yeah, I mean, music had a checkered history at the school. When I first arrived at the school, there was music on the curriculum, but it wasn't very successful at all. And I think that highlights probably one of the dilemmas that schools often face with music. I think there's a traditional view, isn't there, of music on a school curriculum, which is, tends to be about learning to play instruments, taking grade exams, taking GCSEs, and veering towards what you were alluding to earlier, that kind of elitist model of music.
Hmm.
And I think that's certainly the sort of traditional curriculum that I came into. And it withered on the vine, really, because the students, the boys, weren't particularly interested in it. That led to the kinds of issues that you get in a situation like that, issues of poor behavior and disengagement and so on. And there was a belief in the school, which was that music couldn't be a successful subject in an all boys school in an economically deprived area of Luton where we were working, and that culturally, a lot of the parents didn't support music and wouldn't support music, and it could never really succeed at the school. And so the first challenge was really trying to break down that belief. And from that point, music then, we had to drop music from the curriculum. And I think it was about finding the right person. And I think finding the right person for the right school. And, somebody like yourself, you came along full of enthusiasm. And also, I think, with a much broader understanding, a much more inclusive understanding of what music can be like on a curriculum. And that it's not about the elitism. It's not even necessarily about, learning to play an instrument at a high level. It's about the joy of it. I mean, it's always confused me that music is such a big part of all of our lives. Whether we are participants, whether we sing or play instruments or playing orchestras or choirs or anything like that, or whether we just listen to it a lot. There are very few people who don't have music as quite an important part of their lives. And yet, trying to translate that into a curriculum in school always seems to have come across all these barriers. And I think you understood that, and I think you understood that the kind of models of music around things like singing, around things like just a range of experiences. The work that you did working with orchestras and the English National Opera and groups like that, just to expose people to the variety of it. And then also, providing opportunities like, stomping and, rhythm exercises and all the rest of it,
Yeah.
which is just good fun and give that basic understanding. So I think that marriage between somebody who's got that very inclusive view of music and a school that's then going to be receptive to that was what enabled us to start to challenge some of those debilitating beliefs that I think were prevalent before you came along.
Thank you for that, Daniel. I think music isn't necessarily given a priority in many schools. I mean, we're facing a lot of challenges and struggles as music teachers and as music departments with that protected time being taken away from us. Um, I think something that you implemented was really giving me the space, giving me the time to kind of do what I really needed to do. Do you think that was largely because you actually have a love for the arts, but you're also a musician yourself? Do you think that acts as an advantage for you for the understanding? And what if we're talking to um, leaders who aren't necessarily musical or musicians, and they don't really have that understanding? So, what would you say to them?
Yeah, well, it's very kind of you to describe me as a musician, Nadia.
Well, you are. You play the violin. You are a musician.
Yes, not to any great standard, though, it has to be said. I've always loved music, and I've always been very interested in it. I'm certainly not very good at it, as it were. So I think for me, it sits along. How can I put it? It's fundamental as far as I'm concerned. So music is a bit like literacy or numeracy or language. I mean, it is a form of language in one sort of construct, isn't it, as well?
Yes,
And
definitely.
and so I don't think that. Well, no. Let's go back to the first part of your question. Yes, I think it's important to have a head teacher or at least influential people in the senior in an organisation that understand that. I don't think they necessarily need to be musicians, and I don't think they even necessarily have to have an enormous enthusiasm for music, although that massively helps. But in the same way as we understand that learning to read is really important, whether we or not we are avid readers ourselves, and that being numerate to a high level is really important, whether or not we have a passion and a love for mathematics. And I think music ought to be able to, sit in that same sort of camp as that, because I think it is fundamental to, human experience and human existence. And so possibly the issue is, rather than having a head teacher who is themselves a musician or has that real enthusiasm for it, is about making sure that senior leaders understand the fundamentality, if that's a correct word, of music in the human condition. And I guess that's probably what it's about. But I certainly do love music, and that helps. And schools do, I think, to an extent, reflect the enthusiasms and the personality of head teachers, for better or for worse. And so, yeah, it's not a bad
Yeah.
thing if your head teacher and loves music.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something that that helped me, or it made my job a lot easier. When I asked for certain things, I guess the understanding really helped the progression in our school. Um, I think having or integrating music really brought the school to life. I think that it wasn't an easy task by by any means. I guess when you're thinking about changing the whole culture and perception of music within a school, there are certain things that need to happen. One of which is the support from senior leaders. I think a practical step was kind of ensuring giving me the space and the time on the curriculum. So, for example, I wasn't necessarily used for cover. Yes, my timetable was heavily reduced because we didn't have the hours, and we were just kind of building from scratch. That's kind of one of the steps that you implemented. Can you give us any more practical, or can you give leaders or people in charge of music practical steps that they can implement if music is struggling?
Yes, certainly. I mean, I think um, it's a subject which in many schools might have only one practitioner, possibly a couple of practitioners. The nature, because you don't tend to get necessarily a big take up in most schools at Key Stage 4. Music departments, music teams are often really quite small. And of course, you then don't get economies of scale. I mean, the fact that you're a single teacher department, if you are in a school, you've still got the same amount of work to do in terms of writing schemes of work, and the marking preparation. You're teaching lots and lots of different groups. If there's a music entitlement for all students, particularly at Key Stage 3. And so there are particular pressures there, which I think senior leaders need to be aware of. And that's where things like, protecting your music teacher from some of those wider duties that you might expect of other teachers can be important. And I think particularly the situation that you were in, Nadia, where you were, because that music hadn't been on the curriculum for probably about 4 or 5 years before you arrived, where you were having to start with a blank sheet of paper, and recognizing that that's going to require a lot of time investment by the music teacher, because it's the music teacher that has got the subject knowledge, and the senior leaders won't necessarily have, and so they won't be able to do that sort of work. But secondly, also being able to prioritise financial resources in terms of making sure rooms are appropriate for the subject, that the equipment that's required is purchased and procured and made available and looked after, that there is technical support for it, things like these days, stable internet and access and so on. And that will often require an investment which proportionately, particularly in the early stages of establishing music on the curriculum, is going to be proportionally quite a bit more expensive than other established departments. I think we need to be prepared to make that priority to get it up and running. And also then to recognise that at Key Stage 4, where it would tend to take its place amongst the option subjects, that we have to be prepared, and we recognise that finances are really, really tight these days, and so this is a difficult one, but we have to be prepared also to run class sizes if we're following a curriculum that's going to lead to accreditation.
Absolutely.
That are smaller
Absolutely.
than would be economically feasible in other subjects.
Yes, definitely. Daniel, we'll be right back. But if you are listening live, I encourage you to text in. I've got a few more questions for you, Daniel. But before that happens, I just want to pose the question to people who are listening and text in live. Should music be considered as a core subject? We'll be right back.
At Bloomsbury Education, we're passionate about supporting teachers with high-quality professional development books from leading experts. Whether you're navigating your first crucial years as an early career teacher, or a more experienced teacher looking to refresh your practice or take a step up into leadership, our award-winning books are here to help. We publish practical books to support teaching across primary and secondary, from the very best in research-led practice to trusted advice on inclusivity, behaviour and curriculum design. Visit the Bloomsbury Education website at bloomsbury.com/education to find out more, and use code BLOOMTTR24 to save 20% on all education titles. Bloomsbury Education, books for every step of your teaching journey.
Welcome back. Just a quick shout out to Claire and to Kaylee. Thank you for listening. Claire says, hello from another Bedfordshire teacher, TTR host, and previously peripatetic music teacher. Thank you for your message, Claire. Could you just share some insights into your experience of being a music teacher in the Bedfordshire area, please? Thank you for your message, Kaylee. Kaylee says, I work at a school that has just moved music out of rotation, and I feel like it has um, um, reinvigorated my love for the subject. We're starting with year 7, and I'm excited for lessons again and really enjoying planning new schemes. I think when you have a blank canvas, that is honestly my dream. I honestly love just starting from scratch. Kaylee, if you can let us know what is currently working well for you, what are you finding are your struggles? If you can share that, I'll be very, very happy for us to kind of get you in and share your experiences. I think as music teachers, it's really, really important to find your support. As we mentioned previously, often as music departments or as music teachers, we're left in solo one-man departments. And I think at the point in my career when I was in a solo department, I'd always been supported really heavily in previous jobs. And I suddenly found myself in a position where I was on my own and just kind of needing to find it out. And I really wish that I knew that there was a wealth of music teachers out there that would be more than happy to support, more than happy to kind of provide that space. Claire says, saw lots of schools as a Perry, lower and middle schools. I taught whole class world percussion, and it was great because everyone was included in whatever way worked for them, regardless of prior experience. Absolutely. I cannot advocate for music for all enough. Often you get the kind of old school way of teaching music that really, really puts emphasis on you need to read music, you need to be able to understand notation, there needs to be theory. And it really just adds that additional barrier that doesn't need to be there. I think that music making needs to be for all, it needs to be enjoyable, it needs to be fun. We've got lots of text coming in, so we'll get back to that. I'm just going to reintroduce my guest because I'd very much like to work through a few more questions with Daniel and get some insight. So, welcome back, Daniel. I'd very much like us to just delve deeply into your experience of music within the different school contexts that you've been. Could you share some successes, maybe some struggles? I know currently you are in charge of school improvement as well, so I'm sure you encounter many different schools and different contexts, so it'd be really helpful if you could maybe share some things from your experiences, please.
Yeah, sure. I think where I see schools where music is particularly successful, it is when they've got that much broader understanding of the place of music on the curriculum. I remember, the last conversation, you were asking the question about whether music should be a core subject or not. I guess you mean in the sense that every student should be given the opportunity or should be required,
Absolutely.
actually, particularly in
Yes.
stage 3, to have music lessons. And yes, I think they should. And I think in schools where music is very successful, that is generally the case. And wherever possible, for it to be, a dedicated lesson once a week throughout the whole of Key Stage 3, rather than on a rotation with, design, technology, and drama, and other subjects like that. And I think that kind of entitlement to music, art, and drama as being really, really important for children as they're growing up, and to young people, schools that have that they do tend to flourish. They also, I think, where it's very successful, manage the kind of, music is quite unique in a lot of ways on the curriculum, in the sense that there's the taught element of it. However that is perceived by the curriculum leaders that are leading it, but there's also the performance element of it, and of course some students will particularly veer towards that performance element, and there are opportunities then for them to become involved in all sorts of things beyond the taught curriculum. And again, I think where music's very successful in schools, that performance element is quite prominent.
Yeah.
And that then builds a culture around the school where music is exciting, it's engaging. There are quite a lot of students involved in it beyond the lessons. And of course, head teachers love it because it's great, it's great PR for the school, if one's going to look at it.
Yes, exactly.
So yes, it's when it gets embedded in the culture, that's when it's most successful, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Thank you. I have a few more questions, but we have had people text in. Just a hello to Mrs. Ellis. Kaylee has also commented again. Mrs. Ellis says, "Hello, Nadia and Daniel. It is great to hear your thoughts on music at schools where I've also worked. I agree that school leaders must be educated in the life skills music develops. Parents must be educated too. I think that people have their own perceptions of what music education should be and what music should be in schools. I think in the context that we worked in Luton, in an all boys school, this ties in nicely with what Kaylee's just said. It says, "Our biggest challenge has been singing." Kaylee, would you like to just give us some more context, as in why singing has been your biggest challenge? I think singing for me has been my biggest asset. I guess it's because I'm a vocalist, I'm a pianist, and I work with singing a lot. And I really, really use that as a tool. I think my greatest kind of win as a music teacher was definitely when the boys took part in the Trust musical, and I'd got an email from another teacher within the Trust that had also worked in the school, and he just commented saying what an amazing job that would have been, what an amazing job that we'd done, having the boys being up on stage, not only singing but acting. And I guess it's like a full circle moment when you've when your plans just come into when what you've set out has just been really successful. I mean, I don't really know how you felt about when we had the boys up on stage. I think that for me was definitely, still is, a career highlight of mine.
An absolute highlight. I remember it really well, and it had always been my vision at the boys' school that we would get to that point. And I remember having that discussion with you actually when you first came to ask about the post, that we wanted to get to the stage where we could confidently perform and perform, to a level that people genuinely enjoyed, and you absolutely got it to that level, and I think you showed that was possible without having, a lot of students in the school who were, didn't have, who had previous musical experience and previous subject knowledge, because you just spread that enthusiasm for it. Again,
Yeah.
you made a really important point there, I think, Nadia, when you said that one of the reasons that singing was successful at the boys' school was because you're a vocalist and you're really enthusiastic about singing. And I think it's important that, music teachers do allow their passions and their enthusiasms to guide what, the curriculum that they develop, because it will be infectious, as you found. If I could just give a quick shout out to Mrs. Ellis from me as well. Welcome, Bella. Lovely to have you in the show.
Perfect. Daniel, do you mind sticking around? I'm just going to go through some comments, and then I'll come back to kind of asking a few more questions to close. Is that okay?
Sure.
Um, Kaylee has mentioned, bear with me. Katie says, our biggest challenge is singing. Year 7 started super keen and enthusiastic, but now it has dwindled. Some classes just outright refuse to sing, which has been disheartening as we're keen to keep singing in the curriculum through Key Stage 3. To me, singing is everything. Singing is my bread and butter in my curriculum. I can't stress enough how much, or I can't stress the importance of singing and using your voice as your instrument. If we're thinking about the number one struggle that we face as music teachers and educators or music educators, it's budget. And if you're faced with a situation where you don't necessarily have a large budget or resources, what are you going to do? You're going to use singing. One thing that I really, really wanted to start embedding was the culture of music and the culture of singing. Being and working in an all boys school, that was very, very challenging. My number one, I guess, piece of advice for that instance would be to build relationships. And I think one way that I really got the boys on side was to ask them questions, speak to them, find out what they're listening to, find out they um, what they are excited about. I think one thing that we did within our school was introduced a faith singing competition. I think like 96% of our boys were of a Muslim faith, and that was one way of me being able to say, okay, I'm going to take this time and I'm going to learn about you and about your culture, and I find that um, I value your culture and I value you. And that was a real turning point for me when I realized that when you take that bit of extra time to really build the relationships and find out who you have in front of you, you'll definitely have them on side to want to kind of be more open to what you want them to do. And so I'm just going to ask Daniel my final questions, and then we'll move on to uh, the second part or another part of the show. So, Daniel, if I can ask you just my final questions, or just want to get your final thoughts on um, when you're, or as a leader, what qualities and attributes should schools prioritize when searching for a music teacher?
Oh, gosh, that's a tough question,
Mm.
Nadia. And actually, before I answer it, can I just reinforce something you said about the singing, and in terms of some practical advice for Kaylee here as well. I think you're quite right that project you ran when you did the faith singing competition was an absolute game changer, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And I think there were also other things that you did where you very deftly exploited visitors to the school to make music cool, as it were. That's a very young, cool way of saying it. And I think that's what the faith singing competition did. And so I think, Kaylee, if you can find people to come into the school to work with you who are going to be role models for those reluctant singers and actually show them that, yeah, singing is great and it's good fun, and then that may well be one way that you can start to tackle that resistance. But to come to your question, Nadia, I don't think there's an easy answer to that. I think it's really important so again, when you came to work at the school, it wasn't just an application, an interview, and you started. You visited us first. You had a really good look round.
Yes.
We had, we had quite an extensive discussion, what have you, and then we went through the more formal, interview process and what have you. And I think it's kind of that's required, so that the school can get a real sense of what the potential, the candidate's vision is, to what extent it is going to work. We were very transparent with each other, weren't we?
Yeah.
I was very transparent with you in terms of the fact that you would be coming into quite a challenging situation because music hadn't been on the curriculum and because there was this kind of cultural belief amongst the adults in the school that music couldn't work at the school. And I think we then, quite quickly established quite a strong rapport. And maybe it goes back to what you were saying about the importance of building relationships with the students. We
Yes.
have to build relationships with colleagues as well, don't we? And understand each other and make sure we are working as a team. So I think it's more to do with that rather than any kind of specific qualifications.
Hmm.
If I was to pull one thing out, it is subject enthusiasm. We talk about subject knowledge a lot, and obviously technical subject knowledge is very, very important. But actually, the biggest part of subject knowledge, I think, is subject enthusiasm. And you have that in bucket loads, and that is then infectious. So I think that's probably the single most important thing that I'd look for. That and a real can-do attitude. Yes, we
Yeah.
recognise there's a bit of a hill to climb here, but if we do it together, we will get to the top, and we're determined to do so. So it's those sorts of qualities, I think. Does that answer the question?
It does answer the question. I just want to say thank you so, so much for your time, for your insight, also for your support and just allowing me to kind of be all the crazy that I am on a day to day. And you really, really understood how to empower the teacher, how to empower music so that it was able to thrive within a school. And I'm just really, really grateful that you've taken the time to speak to us today. So thank you so, so much.
You're welcome, Nadia. It was a great pleasure. And just a final thought, that's what senior leadership should be about. It should be about empowering your middle leaders, not telling them what to do or showing them how to do it, empowering them to get on with it. So thanks for that final thought.
That's perfect. Thank you so much, Daniel.
Thanks. Bye now.
Bye bye. Okay, there's so much to kind of get into and talk about when we think about music education. I've got some comments from Kaylee says, we find that classes are just lacking enthusiasm and confidence when it comes to singing in lessons. They respond well to songs they know, but when it's something new, they really shy away from it. We have a fantastic school choir and the shows do well, but getting engagement in singing in lessons has been tough, especially as they've got older. And then Bella has commented saying, singing was highlighted as a struggle nationally, not just in a boys' school. And she says, I agree with Daniel that passionate vocalists will drive singing forward. But you might be sitting there, or you might be in a position where maybe you're not a music specialist. I'm sorry, not a music specialist. You're not a vocalist, and your instrument strength might be the piano. You might be a guitarist as a music teacher. You might be a drummer. What do you do then? I completely empathize with that. And I guess my first thinking would be having a no opt out kind of policy, a way of looking at it. And I think when you start embedding singing from the minute they enter, or the minute they're in school, it just becomes second nature. I often have singing and music. Sorry, not music. I often have singing in the beginning of lessons or at the end of lessons, and I really, really just have it as something that we do, and it's not something that we're going to talk about necessarily. If you don't want to do it, I generally have a no opt out option or a no opt out rule within my class, and we're all in it together. And not everybody in my department are singers or would identify as being kind of confident with singing. And we really utilize the resources, so online resources. And if you're not a confident singer, there might be somebody in your class that is a confident singer. I always champion kind of the students who are kind of more able, more willing to just give it a go. And I think ultimately it starts with creating that safe space within your classroom to allow students to be okay with failing and to allow that space that if they get it wrong and if it's not perfect, that is okay. Because I mean, what is the ultimate goal really is we want to contribute to creating well-rounded human beings. And music really helps, really helps with this.
I've always considered myself to be a caring head teacher who acts sensitively to support staff mental health. But what I found increasingly difficult was managing the negative impact on staff mental health when resolving issues related to their employment or daily work. Heartfelt Leadership has been developed by Teachwell Toolkit as a handbook to support head teachers to overcome the challenges of school improvement while supporting staff well-being. We know that difficult conversations can quickly turn into conflict if procedures are not fully transparent, understood and followed. Our handbook takes you through step-by-step processes while maintaining mutual respect, avoiding conflict and finding solutions.
Okay, so if you are listening live, please text in and let me know what your current situation is, and what your department makeup is. I was reflecting on my career to date when I was planning this show, and what I realized is that I have always been in a position where I've been supported. And I reflect back to my first ever school, so when I completed my training, I had a really great mentor, and we're still friends today. She's absolutely brilliant. She's amazing. And what I realize is that teachers coming into, or music teachers coming into the profession now, a lot of people do not have that support, do not have that kind of music mentor to go to that has the wealth of experience. And I really want to know why that is. I really want to know how schools get into the position of having um, or choosing teachers that don't necessarily fit their context. And I don't necessarily think it's anybody's fault, but I think it's important to highlight what a successful music department looks like, and that could be a lot of different things. Going back to the point of different kinds of music departments, they come in all shapes and sizes. So I thought I would kind of give my top tips for the different scenarios that you might face yourself in. So my first one is, if you're a music teacher within a solo, so a one-man department, what are tangible things that you can do to help you and to help kind of take away the burden, the workload that we all find ourselves with? And one thing that worked really well for me when I was in a one-man department is one, realizing that I wasn't going to be able to do it all by myself. And I really found comfort in collaborating with neighbour schools and schools within the wider trust. So finding that confidence to do your research, find the email of the music teacher that is the closest to you, and just extending that, hi, I'm this person and I find myself in this department. How can we help each other? How can we, build your network? Um, I've only recently come into this within the last 2 or 3 years, is just finding that there are so many online communities and supports and forums where other music teachers are, and really utilizing that. One teacher that I've been following on X has I think she's called Liz, has been posting a blog about her days in her music department, and I've really found comfort in reading what happens in her department each day, or what she's doing well. And sometimes a lot of the things that she's doing, I'm doing, and that kind of reinforces the things that are working well for me. I also find comfort in knowing that the struggles that I'm facing, or the struggles that I face, aren't necessarily struggles I face alone. So, utilizing an online community. Another thing would be to attend workshops, conferences. There is some really, really great music CPD out there. And I absolutely love watching other teachers because I always take things that work well, and it's always going to be a trial and error. One things that work for you might not necessarily work for other people, but we're not really going to know unless we try. Um, Thank you to everyone who has been kind of posting within the chat. If you have any more comments, or if you have any more thoughts on kind of what's working well within your department, or anything that you need some support with, please text in and I'd be happy to comment, read out, and put it to the rest of the people who might be listening, whether that be live or listening at a later stage. The episode today is called Navigating the Struggles and the Successes of a Music Teacher. One thing that I'd say is I love being a music teacher. I love music. I'm passionate about it. And I often find that remembering why you started.
At Bloomsbury Education, we're passionate about supporting teachers with high-quality professional development books from leading experts. Whether you're navigating your first crucial years as an early career teacher, or a more experienced teacher looking to refresh your practice or take a step up into leadership, our award-winning books are here to help. We publish practical books to support teaching across primary and secondary, from the very best in research-led practice to trusted advice on inclusivity, behaviour and curriculum design. Visit the Bloomsbury Education website at bloomsbury.com/education to find out more, and use code BLOOMTTR24 to save 20% on all education titles. Bloomsbury Education, books for every step of your teaching journey.
I think remembering your why will definitely help you navigate your way through the hard days. I think sometimes people forget that being a music teacher means, or people may not forget, people just don't understand that being a music teacher means that you don't always have a lunch break. You don't have time before school. You don't have time after school, because we're constantly working towards another show. We're constantly working towards assemblies. I think people underestimate how much we actually do and provide for a school. My current head teacher has said that music is the heartbeat of the school, and I couldn't agree with that statement anymore. We thrive because we're allowed the time, we're given the space. Often music can be not seen as a priority on the curriculum. Often there is a lack of understanding and appreciation for the work that the teachers actually do. So when I was reflecting on kind of the issues to touch on or to tap into within the show, I came across, excuse me. I came across a quote by a music teacher or online. I think he's called Vaughan, and this sums it up really, really beautifully for me. Excuse me, I've got a cold, I've got a cough, I'm sorry. Apologies, I'm back. So I found this quote, and I often read it from this music teacher, and I think this really, really sums up what music education means. And this is something that I wanted to close the show with today, and this is the quote. The music department is an alternate universe where peoples are often unrecognizable from who they are outside of it. The shy become confident, the agitated become calm, the lonely become included, the quiet become heard, and the lost become found. Music reveals the real child. I read that often, and I've never resonated with anything more. And it's definitely something that I want us to think about. I want us to reflect on when we think about music education. I definitely am looking forward to doing more music specific shows. So if there's anything that you are interested in wanting to know more about, and wanting a future show to be dedicated on, I welcome you to text in. Or if you want to find me on X, I am NR music teacher, and very, very much look forward to connecting and talking a little bit more about music education with you all. So that is my first show. I'm Nadia, your host, and you've been listening to The Late Show.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.